Hello.
I'm Julian.
And I am Tom.
We are Team Binge, and we are here once again to talk about a television show. Tom, what television show are we here to talk about?
This is exciting. Brand new television show. We are covering The Last of Us.
Did you say The Last of Us?
The Last of Us, correct.
Oof.
Did you watch something else?
I have been watching This Is Us, which there's these pressure cookers in. Anyways, no, I watched The Last of Us. We watched episode 1, which is called When You're Lost in the Darkness.
Mm-hmm. Can you finish that line? When
you're lost in the darkness, look towards the light.
Yes, I think that's what it is. Well done.
Oh, man.
Look for the light, maybe. I don't think it's towards, but I'll give it to you.
Tom, just so you know, this is not a trivia episode.
Not yet? Okay.
No, we're not doing trivia on this yet. Thank you for joining us. We know it's been a little bit of a hiatus, but we've been waiting for Ted Lasso Season 3, and still no word. So since we are lost in the darkness, waiting for the light that is Ted Lasso, we've decided to do this show, which Tom has a great affinity towards, and I am learning to love, much like someone who has been married for years and years and years. But, Tom, give me your history of The Last of Us. Now that I made the This Is Us joke, I'm going to keep having to really focus to not say that. So help me out. You know this show and what it's based on. Give us your history, please, sir.
Yeah, so I have played through this game multiple times, The Last of Us, which was a PlayStation exclusive. So it's one of those where I ended up purchasing a PlayStation, not specifically for this game, but really played ultimately probably 2 or 3 games on PlayStation, this being one of them. It was the first game I think I had ever played where I finished the main story and immediately hit new game. I wanted the experience again. It was a game that was so engrossing, such an amazing story, and was so happy to hear that they were making it. Certainly trepidatious because as somebody that already has an affinity for the characters, I kind of feel like I know them already. All the casting news and everything, you're always kind of like, can they fill the shoes of all these characters? And I can say from my side, in my opinion, they absolutely crushed it. The acting is phenomenal. The production is incredible. I'm not sure if I wrote down his name, but the lead kind of showrunner was the same gentleman that did, I think it's Craig Muniz or something like that. He's the same guy that did Chernobyl, which if you've seen that show was, again, brilliantly created and done. And this follows a lot of those kind of same beats with the cinematography and layout of the show. So super cool. And I'm excited to watch this with you because you have no background in this. So whereas I know probably a lot of the kind of main beats that's going to happen in the story, especially in this pilot episode, I'm very interested to talk through with you and see how a lot of these elements hit you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be... I mean, typically I'm the guy that's in the room that knows everything, you know? I know what's happening. I'm really well informed. So it's interesting for me to take on a show like this where I am the one that's lost in the darkness, looking for your light, being knowledge. I'm not going to do the thing where if you're joining us for the first time, I mention that we're talking about a certain show, but I do want to point out this show is on HBO. And so that is important because my history with HBO is that they typically don't miss, and they do these very well. They put the money into it. And so, especially for their Sunday night shows, which historically has been like the Game of Thrones, I'm sure The Sopranos, that like Sunday evening viewing, they typically hold for their marquee. And so it's cool that they took a video game adaptation and made it that. I hope they can fill the shoes of the Mortal Kombat movies, the Street Fighter movies, the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. All of those, I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say they were instant classics, much beloved, and the amount of awards they won hopefully will be topped by... I almost said This Is Us. Oh, I should not have made that joke. It's going to kill me.
But it's very true, right? Because there's always been the stigma with video games and trying to change mediums in movies or TV shows. It's been done for a lot of really critically acclaimed games, but this one I think does stand above the rest in terms of the story, and we'll be able to experience it throughout this season. And I think a lot of viewers that are new to the franchise saw it here, where video games are capable of telling incredible, amazing stories. It's not, this game is clearly has a lot of violence, and I think they kind of bring that back a little bit for the show, because obviously to move forward in a video game, you have to have violence, you have to have action with your characters in most of these scenes. But what this show does is it pulls back some of that violence and brings in more of the character drama, and we get more backstory for a handful of characters like Sarah, for example, Joel's daughter, as well as some of the other characters that we'll kind of talk through for this first episode. It's taking already great source material, molding it without trying to revamp it, and so far, so good.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're the one that played it, but isn't like the main thing that everyone raves about this video game is the storytelling and the narrative, and that is already developed, so moving it into a TV show seems to be an easy transition where, and it's forgivable, Mortal Kombat is a video game, not much of a story, you know? So
No.
for someone to try and create, and wait, who did the most recent Mortal Kombat TV show? Was that HBO? I think
I think
was
it
HBO.
was. It got
right?
released on HBO for sure, yeah.
All right, well, pause this podcast. Tom and I are going to go record a Mortal Kombat HBO podcast. Maybe I'm going to regret everything I've just said. But no, having watched this first episode, definitely enjoyed it. I'm excited to talk about it with you. It's a little bit different from the other stuff we've done. Those of you that are somehow stumbled across this for the first time, our backlog is Ted Lasso, Outer Range, 1899, The After Party, which skew from weird sci-fi westerns to lovable soccer shows. So this one's going to be interesting, and I will be interested in your insight. And I think right off the bat, this thing was pretty successful, which I think when you and I talked about the show, I was a little bit confused as to what the popularity of this would be, but I'm pretty sure they kicked off with a bang, right?
Yeah, from what I read, this has been the third largest series debut that HBO has ever had, with about 4.7 million viewers on Sunday. I think it's just behind both the Game of Thrones and then the spin-off House of the Dragon. So, and that's, I think, in kind of the streaming era. And if you look at all the different reviews through all these different websites and Rotten Tomatoes and everything, it's been very, very, very well received. And we're obviously just seeing the first episode here, but from what I haven't read too far into it, but granted, I already know a lot of the story, a lot of the further episodes and character building and everything seems like this is really a home run of a show.
Sure. Very popular. And as Oscar Wilde said, anything that's popular is wrong. So let's be wrong together, Tom. We're going to deep dive into this. It was tough to break this episode into scenes, so we're going to go through it. And I think it had kind of distinct parts. It was like a setup of, hey, get to know these characters, an introduction, and then everything goes bad, and then 20 years later. So we're going to dive into that and talk about the parts we liked. Tom, I'm going to lean on you heavily, buddy, to paint inside the lines and give us a little bit more detail that I can't provide. But I do appreciate any type of show that starts with a weird PBS news program of 3 actors that I recognize. And I'm like, oh, I know all these guys, and I'm assuming will not show back up in this show. But they're kind of giving us a very simple runabout of, hey, the thing the world should fear the most, guess what we're foreshadowing here is, not necessarily this type of disease, but they're talking about fungi, which is the plural of fungus, maybe? I don't know. Yep. I'm not a scientist. And every actor in the scene is great. They're all, I don't know if you ever watched, did you ever watch Hell or High Water?
No, so I know 2 of the actors. I didn't know the big lumbering guy kind of in the middle. What is he from? Is that Hell or High Water?
He's from Hell or High Water, which was a show about the building of the railroad across the West after the Civil War, and he is like a big bad who is always there to foil, and he's cruel and he's terrible, but that actor is great. And then the other guys, I thought of him from The Mummy. Did you? The guy that gives the explanation on fungi.
Yeah, and it's so brilliantly delivered. But yeah, John Hannah, I know him more certainly from The Mummy is my first inkling to his work, but I know him a lot from Spartacus, that Starz show that they did probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago. He kind of played like the main guy that led all the different gladiators and everything. He did a really, really cool job in that show, but just crushes it in this little monologue that he gives. I loved it.
Tom, if you don't think I had a pirated copy of the season of Spartacus on a hard drive as I was traveling in my younger years, then actually can Fedra come after me if I admit to having a pirated version of a Starz TV show?
I didn't realize they did a pirate spinoff.
No. That's
Sorry,
called,
I get that wrong.
That's called the Black Sail, which is a different Starz Spartacus type. And then the other guy in this scene is the young CW from Mythic Quest. That's who I thought of him as.
Yeah, I think it's Josh Brenner. I know more as Big Head from Silicon Valley. But again, great character and does a great job of kind of hosting these guys.
And they're like, guess what? Everyone should be afraid of fungi. They're bad. And I think we are recording this just for anyone who, if it's like 2050 and you're listening to us talk, God bless. We are doing this in 2023 where I will say, got out of the peak of a pandemic, we'll say. And so I think them talking about this hits a little bit harder knowing what happened over the last couple of years. I think if you don't do, and maybe that's part of the reason why, I don't know when this was like scheduled for production, when they picked this up for a show, but I do think this scene and the way they explain what a pandemic is, and we as an audience are like, yeah, no, we're familiar.
We get it.
Yeah.
And that's what the big guy was kind of like saying, like, that is the big threat to humanity. And it's like, yes, sure. And like, that's why I love like John Hannah, where he kind of comes in and says, yes, that will kill millions and millions of people, but we'll survive and we'll get through it. Whereas this kind of cordyceps or fungal infection is completely different. And I think he even kind of mentions the idea of like climate change, which I know you think is still a big hoax, but the idea that the fungi can evolve if the world gets a little bit hotter, which I thought was another kind of cool little ad. But this whole bit, and I listened to some of the creators talk through some of this content, and apparently this whole bit was never intended to be in the show. They had kind of written this up and thought about putting it in, but ultimately skipped it. But then once they finished kind of the whole series and they kind of jumped off with the current opening that they had, kicking off in 2003, they kind of realized they needed something to kind of kickstart the show and give a little bit more backstory, because none of this is in the games. In the games, you just kind of start and there's an outbreak and you don't really know the origins of it. So going a little bit deeper with this, I thought was a brilliant ad.
Sure. I think it's helpful. I don't know that it's absolutely necessary, but I think there are members of the audience watching The Last of Us that need it, and I'm glad they put it in there, if not just to see three actors that I like do a weird... And I love how he hams for the camera, the host. It keeps like cracking jokes about things that are going to kill us all, and he's smoking and staring into the... Man, TV was just better back then. We go from there, and then we get the intro scene, and I don't know what it is, Tom. I feel like every show that's like a prestige show uses the same people to do their intro. They all have, like, this feels to me very similar to Game of Thrones, very similar to 1899. Like, I don't know. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I don't know, does it have roots in the game? Does it have fungi in the game?
It does, actually. The same exact music and not the same art, similar art. I think it's all black and white in the game's intro, but they're kind of doing the intro credits for the game while showing this fungi like expand and take over the world and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. And I think there's like some symbolism throughout, like where the fungi raises up into like city, kind of showing how this started in cities around the world. Eventually shows like kind of an outline of the US, and then at the very end I think you can even see like two little fungi kind of pop up in the middle, which kind of symbolize Joel and Ellie. So really cool take on the opening credits from the game.
Sure, they're showing like the stuff grow, and one is like a profile of a skull
That's
or
cool
a face.
too.
That was very cool. I mean, I'm not knocking it. It just has a very same vibe
Agreed. Yeah.
as a lot of these shows. Which if it works, it works. What I really like when they do is when they do a like slow motion version of a pop song. They typically save those for previews, but anyways,
Correct.
I digress. We open in 2003 and we get the establishing of characters. And I felt like this whole beginning section, as a show should do, and this show does well, is it's like, here's who these people are, like learn who they are and start to care about them. So that we can destroy you emotionally.
Yes,
now,
for sure.
2003, obviously, when the whole zombie fungi thing kicked off. Tom, who were you in 2003? Let's get who Tom was in 2003.
Gosh, man, I was some high school nerd.
Good. Glad we did that. All right, we've established you as a character, and now we care about you. Our main characters are Joel Miller, great name. In fact, very similar to, just realizing now. Anyways, it's a great name. And Joel Miller, our main character, I believe, I don't know, I haven't played the game. He may die in episode 2, is played by one Pedro Pascal. I feel like you turned me on to Pedro Pascal is the wrong phrasing, but you introduced me to Pedro Pascal, which then turned me on to Pedro Pascal.
Which is natural.
Which is natural.
It's a natural reaction.
What's your history with Pedro Pascal?
I mean, I think he's clearly a phenomenal actor, but I think he got his big break on Game of Thrones. Like, he played the Red Viper, and he came in, I don't know what season it was on Game of Thrones, but it was a brand new season where they kind of brought in the Martells, and he just stole and chewed up every scene that he was in, and just incredible. And spoiler alert, like, once he kind of got killed off on that show, it just made his mythos just so much more awesome.
Right.
And I think from there he did Narcos, what I think is one of his follow-up shows, which was really, really cool. Talk about the story of Pablo Escobar. But again, we'll watch anything that gets in. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, he does a great job in this. Other people, mainly our cousin, would know him from Burn Notice. And then I have a special place, and I tweeted this out on our Team Binge tweeter, is he the cast of Community, a TV show that I love and that I think Tom has some affection for.
Yep.
They did a table read during the pandemic, and because no one likes Chevy Chase because he's a jerk, they had Pedro Pascal stand in and read, and he couldn't get through the scene because he was laughing so hard.
Yeah.
And it is on YouTube. I would encourage all of you to go watch Pedro Pascal do a table read with the cast of Community if you've seen this TV show. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do. Go watch all 6 seasons of Community and then go on YouTube and watch that table read, and it will make your day. But I think I was first introduced to him in Narcos, and he's okay. Great. He also Mandalorian. He's in the Mandalorian. He's often wearing a helmet. But yeah, good to have him there. And we meet his daughter, who is Sarah Miller. And she is played by Nico Parker. And Nico Parker looked very familiar because she is the daughter of Thandie Newton of Mission Impossible 2 fame. Boom. Nailed it, right?
I think I probably know her more from Westworld. And I believe you pronounce her name Tandy Way Newton. But, man, like, absolute spitting image of her mother, right?
Yeah.
Like, when she came on screen, I was like, this has to be a relation. And, yeah, sure enough.
She does a great job because she carries like most of the weight of this first.
So much.
It's
so much.
Almost. Yeah. I mean, I don't know who comes back later on, but she carries a lot of the weight. And then we have Tommy Miller, her uncle, Joel's brother. I was not familiar with this actor. Were you?
I haven't seen him from much, but yeah, it's Gabriel Luna. I think my knowledge of the man came from Terminator. I think he was in one of the most recent remakes where he played like a new version of the T-1000. So He was really cool in it, but I mean, he's Terminator. He's very just one note, running and looking menacing.
See, I have trouble with this because you know where this story's going, so I can't ask if people are going to come back later. So I won't. I'll let it slide, and I'll watch this as it goes. We are introduced by this. We get a whole family breakfast scene, which everyone loves, and it does make you kind of like these characters just a little bit. We do get the token combat vet bumper sticker, which shows like to do whenever we need to. It's like, oh, when you were in Helmand, or they just drop one thing, like, oh, my third tour, and you're like, okay, that guy knows how to shoot someone. And this part is always played by John Barenthal. That's what I thought when I saw this guy. Obviously, John Barenthal is probably not going to be playing a like small part in a show like this. But he was the John Barenthal of this show.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. That could be good casting as well.
Yeah.
I think one thing to note right now, after we kind of meet these three main characters, is this opening takes place in 2003, but in the video game, it's actually 10 years earlier than this, because this is actually the 10-year anniversary of when the video game came out. So the time jump of 20 years is still the same, but I think all this actually happened in like 1993 in the game. So some of the references they have, like in Sarah's room, where she's got like a Destiny's Child poster and some other stuff in there, they kind of play a little bit with it and kind of do a cool time jump. That way, once you kind of get to present, it's our present in 2023.
Okay. Well, then I'll redirect my question, Tom. In 1993, who were you?
Oh, man. I was just a little elementary school idiot. Or nerd, sorry. Cut out idiot.
We got it. We've got the soundbite. All right, I'm glad we did that. We know so much more about you in 10-year increments. We find out he's a hardworking dad. He's obviously making ends meet and not afraid to work a double on his own birthday, which is aggressive. We also know that he's not a promise keeper. He's a promise breaker, because he says, I will bring home a cake, I promise. And he does not. But he loves his daughter, and I do appreciate a kid that sneaks into their parents' room in order to take a watch to go get it fixed. That's kind of a resourceful and kind gesture. So I'm instantly in on Sarah Miller, and I hope she lives through this whole TV show.
Unfortunately. But I do like the way they set this up, because they make it seem like, oh, she's just a teenager. She's going into her dad's room and stealing some money and even when they eventually get to the watch scene, you think she's going to pawn it. But she says, when the guy says, oh, 20, she's like, is that it? And he's like 30. But it kind of like plays on the idea of her selling it versus her actually paying to fix it. I thought it was pretty cool.
You know what's interesting is maybe I just missed it. I liked her from the beginning, so it didn't like occur to me that she was stealing money or pawning the watch. I don't know how I missed that, but I assumed she was like doing something good with it the whole time. But now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what they were doing. Maybe it's because she's like helping him in the kitchen and doing things and feeding him eggshells. I don't know. I thought it was all right. Well, I missed that. So,
and this, I'll just say it here too, and I'm not going to do this throughout, but I'm sure there's a segment of our audience that has played the game and loves some of these Easter eggs. But if you like pause and look in her room, it's just loaded with Easter eggs from the game. And even this moment of her opening up the dresser drawer to like find this watch and get cash, I mean, that is a staple of the game, where you're just always trying to find resources. So you're opening up every drawer you can come across. So it's kind of a little nod to that. There's like a birthday card that she made for her dad in the game, where she kind of picks it up and she's like, oh, I forgot to give this to dad. And you can see that exact same card on her desk in her room. There's just so much brilliant little added things that they put from the game to kind of pay homage to it. It's a lot of fun. So for those of you that would do the game, I'll try to point out a couple of them, but won't get too crazy. You can watch some YouTube videos to catch them all.
Right. No, there's definitely that level in the game where you're in the kitchen and one of you has to wash the plates, one of you makes the eggs, and then the other person is like putting the eggs in the pan, and you all have to work together, but you're on like an air. Oh, that's Overcooked. Never mind.
Oh man, we are terrible at that game.
Oh man, Overcooked ends marriages, families, and friendships. That's what Overcooked does. I will go out on a limb. Anyways, a lot of tension in Overcooked, and speaking of tension, this show does a really good job of building it. Like, and maybe it's just because as a parent, and I know that's maybe a cop-out, but like anything that involves kids that like they are going slowly towards danger and it's getting a little bit, and if you're paying attention to the show and they don't hide it, but like you can tell there is stuff happening in the background that is leading towards what we ultimately know is going to be like the pressure cooker and This Is Us. It's going to lead to some bad things. So I appreciated how they did this. Once again, I don't know. I think some shows do it poorly. This show does it well in terms of building that and not like hitting you over the head with it. But we have the watch repair interaction where she's clearly getting it fixed, and I guess the spouse of that person comes out and she's like, no, we're closing. You got to get out. We have the jets flying over. The one thing that every show has to do, and I love it, is the news has always got to be playing in the background. And they're like, a strange disturbance in the park. 4 people were eaten by other people today. And so I appreciate all that happening and building in the background.
Well, I think there's some other stuff too, like when she's at school and she's like writing something down on her paper, and she gets like a reflection of light on her hand, and she goes and looks at her classmate, and her classmate's like bracelet is kind of like twitching, having muscle spasms, which later in the episode they show a sign that said like symptoms of the cordyceps virus is, or cordyceps fungus, however you say it, is like twitching and of the hand. So I think there's even a bit more there. They even do a lot of like clock and timer stuff throughout this episode or this sequence, which I think is cool. So it's almost like a countdown to when the world almost kind of comes to an end, like when they're making the cookies, when she's fixing the watch. They do a lot of that, which is very clever and well played.
Yep. When they're making the cookies, and they're not making chocolate chip cookies like any normal person would want. They're making raisin cookies, and that was probably where the tension broke for me. I was like, no raisin cookies. Make chocolate chip, please. And thank you. Anyways, Sarah spends time with the neighbor. Once again, you're kind of like, okay, she's alone all day, so she goes over to the neighbor to do her homework and help out. Like, that's super sweet. I do appreciate Buddy Garrity being in the show for half a second. Do you know who Buddy Garrity is, Tom?
Is he like the old guy like feeding the lady in the front yard?
Yeah,
I don't know. Okay.
He's from Friday Night Lights. He's a big character in the TV show Friday Night Lights. Buddy Garrity, that actor's great. He's also in like The Leftovers. But anyways, I digress. The cool part during this whole sequence is she like borrows the DVD, she's leaving, and you see the old lady start to change in the background, and it's done so well because you're focused on her. I don't think they try and hide it, but it is like, it's not over the top, and you're like, oh no, is it going to happen right now? Please get out of that house. Please get out of that house.
You see her like, because they've established this character is can't really move, is deaf, I think they even mentioned, and when you see her mouth like start to open and it's all fuzzy in the background, it's just so incredibly creepy. And again, with the music, they do a really good job of kind of slowly building up and like, something gonna happen, and then boom, she cuts away and just walks like, oh, can I borrow this DVD? So good. Let me say too, the other really good part of this is like as she's walking away, then you get that awesome bit of the dog, how the dog knows before anybody else does that, hey, something's going on, and is just staring at the old lady. So good.
See, it's scenes like that freak me out when it's, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden my dog starts doing that to the back door. And I know nothing should be outside my back door. And that's why dogs are also creepy. This is then where we separate from establishing to it all goes wrong. And does she go to sleep? Is that what happens here?
Well, she comes home. Dad eventually comes home. Joel comes home at like 10. It's late. I think they have
they watch
back
the
and
DVD.
Forth. They watch the DVD. And again, the DVD is actually a call from the game. It's like a very specific one. I don't think I wrote it down. It's like Ninja Viper 2 or something.
How is that part of the game? Explain. I'm curious now.
There's actually a lot, and I'm sure we'll see it later on, because the whole idea is the world stopped on this day, right? Like there's no movies, there's no new content. So like throughout the game, as you're walking through a mall or the city, you see billboards and they all have like movie posters for these different things. So I think some of this is just kind of called to the game where they're talking about, oh, movies that Joel used to watch and used to talk about, and characters are like talking about their affinity for kind of what was. So I'm sure we'll see kind of more of it, and I'll kind of call it out as we go, because there's other movie references that the game loved to play on.
Right. Joel has to go break Tommy out of Disney jail, and Sarah, she wakes up alone. Once again, they show the clock. I think it's like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something like that. She goes outside. There's a lot of stuff happening in terms of helicopters and distant sirens and lights. And so she wanders outside, and the neighbor's dog is in a state. And so she tries to take him back inside, and I wish she would not try and take that dog back inside the house.
Well, I mean, she did turn on the TV, and the TV said just stay inside. And what's the first thing this kid does? Goes outside to get this dog and goes to the neighbor's house.
Okay, so you think Sarah got what she deserved ultimately? That's Tom's stance.
But she used poor judgment here. The TV is always right. If I learned anything about the internet and the TV. Always right.
Here's my take on this is when you walk into a neighbor's house and there is a large amount of blood that you step in on the floor, back up, go find a phone and call the authorities. Instead, she walks in and there's Buddy Garrity saying, help me. And let me ask you this, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Do these, I guess, lack of a better word, we're going to call them zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have some sort of added strength to them? Is there a reason why stout Buddy Garrity and his raisin cookie wife were defeated by this old lady who atrophied in a wheelchair for a while?
Yeah, I think the idea, and they kind of do it in that exposition in the beginning, is that the fungus kind of takes over your body and can control your limbs and do all this. So, the idea is it gives it like super strength. And you see later where some of these like zombies are running after, but they don't have like a lot of the coordination, so they're slipping and falling. There's definitely a lot of that. But they do add some concepts that weren't in the game, with specifically like the little tendrils that kind of come out of the mouth.
Okay.
It's kind of neat if you like look at the cordyceps fungus that they kind of use as the stepping stone for this. The idea is like it takes over ants and certain insects, and it will literally like force the insect to climb to the very top of a tree and then start growing its fungus all over it, so that way it can spew its spores and everything else all around and get higher. So that's kind of part of like the zombification of insects. So I think what they're doing is they're playing on that and saying, if you get bit towards the head, you're going to turn quicker than if you get bit in the leg, because the virus has got to travel up to your brain to kind of take over. And then the idea of tendrils actually coming out of the mouth to make more of these fungi, it's just super, super creepy and a really cool addition.
It is certainly creepy. That is for sure.
There's another bit that they also kind of changed that as we kind of get further on, but there's a concept in the game called like spores. So again, a zombie would like push out, I don't know, just like floating specks of dust or whatever. And if you inhale that, then you would get infected. So I think they took that out of the series. And I think the showrunners kind of said specifically in the game, your character like put on a gas mask when you're entering these certain areas, but they didn't want to have their characters constantly putting on masks. And I think some of that concept and gameplay looks very similar to like the Upside Down from Stranger Things. So with kind of like the floating specks and darkness and everything. So I think they stayed away from it. And I think it's probably for the better. It's more of a game mechanic than it needs to be for a show.
Sure. So let me ask you, with this like tendril fungi virus, how soon can we harness it in order to like create workers to work in factories and stuff? Like how quickly can we replace robots by just infecting our workers? Sorry, I thought I was at work. I apologize. I was trying to Six Sigma this zombie curse thing into, we wouldn't even have to pay benefits. We should get on this. Tom, we should get on this right now.
I'll make a note. I mean, they did do it in Shaun of the Dead, where like at the very end, they had like the zombies be like grocers and like pushing carts, but they were on like chains. It's fantastic.
Well, what I think is funny is there's like an evolution of zombie where I feel like when we were younger or earlier mythology of like a zombie, it was more like an evil or like a spirit or some like undead thing. Whereas, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe this was back in the day, they did it in sci-fi, but it's very much more like biological disease. And so it's interesting that these different shows, video games, whatever, do a different take.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate one where it is, you know, mushrooms taking over the body. Because, I mean, I know I'm not the only one that's had mushrooms take over their body before. You know what I'm saying? High five?
Yep.
No. Buddy Garrity, too soon. He gets done dirty. She runs out of that house. She is chased. So we do establish these are moderately fast zombies. Is this?
These are runners,
You
for
have,
sure.
Okay, these are runners. Got it. And who shows up but handsome Joel? And he uses that pipe wrench with deadly efficiency, which I've got to think is the first weapon in the game you're given. Is that? This seems very much a video game thing.
Yeah, he's not actually a plumber, like trying to save a princess. He, like a lot of what you do is pick up 2x4s, crowbars, wrenches, and you use those as kind of your early melee weapons in the game. So again, cool little nod to the game for sure.
I didn't appreciate, and this is something that's always bothered me in shows, how quickly he uses it once and drops it. I'd be like, hey, it worked once and it's not out of wrenches, so let's keep using that wrench. It's unlimited wrenching ability, unlike a gun.
Touche.
Then we're on the run. We're off like a gun. I feel like I shouldn't have made that rhyme, but I did. Two things here. I feel like you have enough time to go into your house and grab supplies. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the only one with a zombie bug out bag in their house that is just ready to go all the time. I also felt like Zombieland, the movie, which I really do love and appreciate, came into play here where he has the rules about like seat belts and speed limits are necessary because it's funny, it's like you're more likely to die not wearing your seatbelt than you are from a bite to the neck, something along those lines.
Yeah.
So when they take off, I was just like, guys, seatbelts, speed limits, like let's take our time, let's be methodical.
Safety first.
But from a show perspective, it's great because we're just like, it's chaos. Shot really well, a lot of fun stress, if fun stress is a thing, and then, hey, absolute chaos.
And this scene is just so familiar for those that played the game. Like, even the dialogue is beat for beat from the game. And these scenes, the way they go by the burning house, the way they see somebody on the side of the road that has a kid, and he says they gotta, we also have a kid, somebody else will pick him up, straight from the game. And I love the way this is shot because it's shot like a video game, right? You're getting it from Sarah's perspective, kind of in the back seat. And that's how it is in the game. You're able to kind of move left and right as her in the back seat and kind of see this whole craziness unfold.
In the game, you don't just play one character. You swap between character perspectives. Is that correct?
You start this game playing as Sarah. Like,
okay.
Having a little party bit or giving the present of the watch to the dad. Really, you see the pandemic through her eyes.
Okay. And so you then obviously complete the game as Sarah. Okay. Got it.
We'll get there.
If you have a short attention span like me. I've only beaten like 3 video games in my life, Tom, and I can only name maybe 1 or 2 of them. So that third one's questionable. We are then in town, I guess, and I think we're Texas. I think they mentioned like San Antonio or something, or maybe I'm completely making this up. I think like
you're right.
They were
yeah.
Texas. We have a plane crash, which looks great, leads to a car crash, which looks rough. In terms of the passengers involved, not that it's not shot well. The moment where the 2 cars, so they drag themselves out of the car, Sarah's wounded, she's got an ankle thing, turf toe, I think is what they call it.
Yeah. And
her and Joel are on one side, Tommy's on the other, the 2 cars are separating them. This is such a classic video game thing of like, hey, we got separated, I'm on this side, you're on that side, I can shout to you, but we have to meet up at the end of the level. I was like, wait, let's take a moment. There's no way to get around these two cars. These two cars have blocked us off completely. I know they're on fire, guys, but we can't, because Tommy's got that hunting rifle. I don't really want to separate myself from that hunting rifle. I left my pipe wrench in the yard. Anyways, this leads to a very cool foot chase. Once again, these zombies are runners. And then we run into a U.S. soldier. And my only gripe here, Tom, is how quickly we have devolved into, like, this is only, what, we're 12 hours into this? 6 hours into whatever this is, right? It hasn't been that long since the first biting, I'm assuming.
Well, in this town, yes, but we've already gotten the idea of, like, it's already been happening in Jakarta and around the world. So the assumption would be the military knows more than we know at this point, which is why he's getting these orders.
Listen, I guarantee that guy does not know more than the people on the ground.
The individual, no.
The scuttlebutt has not reached him. But the quickness in which on the radio they're like, listen, just shoot them all. We'll figure this out later. You probably won't get court-martialed or stand trial for this. And this guy decides to shoot a civilian is, just real quick. I don't know. But Uncle Tommy's quicker, which is nice because he gets in there. So that's something.
Well, and I think I know we're kind of joking around a little bit about levity, but, they showed earlier that Tommy was a veteran himself. So him having to make that decision to, shoot one of his brothers in arms, I guess, for lack of a better word, to be able to save Joel and Sarah here, it's brutal.
Yeah, it is brutal. I mean, this whole thing is brutal. I'm trying to make light of a very rough scene, but yeah, maybe my outlook on humanity and civilization is brighter than what this show is, but we devolve into eating and shooting each other super, super quick. But I guess I've watched Black Friday videos where people are trying to get television, so maybe I should tailor my expectations. Unfortunately, during this, Sarah is hit and she goes to sleep, and it seems necessary for the plot of this show. But talk me through a video game. Is this what happens?
I mean, it is from how the soldier, what he says, what he's told over the radio, Tommy coming to save the day, Joel crawling over to Sarah as she dies. I mean, it is all straight from the game. And even knowing that it was coming this whole time, it just absolutely tore me apart and was so sad. And again, to your point, like, obviously they're doing this to kind of help set up and give you backstory and understand how and why Joel does the things that he will eventually do. But man, my gosh, did they do such a good job of capturing this moment. And it was brutal and it was terrible.
Yeah, not fun to watch. Pedro Pascal does a great job. Sarah does a great job. I don't know. I'm going to go back to that U.S. soldier. Radios are really dicey. That guy on the other line might have been like, hey, yeah, shoot him over to your Humvee and then shoot him over to me. And then he's like, yeah, shoot him over to headquarters. And it kept cutting out. And it was just like, shoot him, shoot him. He's like, wait, what, sir? And he's like, yeah, shoot him over to McDonald's. Get him something to eat. And then we'll take him over, shoot him over there. And unfortunately, that's why you have to be clear, concise, and short on a radio. Over. Anyways, did I catch a niner in there? Calling from a walkie-talkie? All right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to make the sad parts happy,
No,
Tom.
it's understandable, man. It was brutal. But yeah, so that is, for lack of a better word, the prologue of the game here. And then we get the 20-year time jump, and we're in Boston.
And so at this point, are they like insert more coins? It's like you have to pay like 50 more cents. Oh, I bet this is probably like $1 game though, right? You got to put $1 in order to continue the story.
Have you played modern video games, Julian? You pay
Describe,
all of your quarters up front.
Describe.
All 600,000 of them, whatever they are nowadays.
So many quarters. So many quarters. Anyways, we're 20 years later. Boston, Massachusetts, USA.
Is it USA anymore? That's an interesting question.
Oh, look at you.
Not
look
really
at
united.
you. All right, well, Duly noted. Listen, if there's no USA anymore, Tom, I don't want to live in this world. That's where I'm at, right? USA.
I'm surprised.
USA. No, I got to get through it 3 times. Don't interrupt. USA. There's 3. Now you can talk. Oh, the genie appeared. Hello, Uncle Sam. Go ahead.
I thought it was going to be George Bush that appeared. I figured you would have brought that up
George
during
W.
the flashbacks.
George W. How are... Well, George... I guess George Bush Sr. could appear, but... then that's a ghost. Anyways, go ahead.
No, that was going to be my point. That because it took place in 2003 when they're at the school, they show the clock, and then there's the picture of George W. on the wall. I think even later, when they're in the quarantine zone, we get a T-shirt. It's like Lieberman Gore, which is also kind of funny.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, so we're in Boston, a long way from Texas. We have a little boy in very distinct shoes, wanders into like a quarantine town. He's stopped by SWAT team members. Once again, you can stop me if there's terms for all these people, but from an outsider, this is how it looked. The young man needs a haircut, and they just really I guess this is 20 years of living with this. They have to be this brutal, and so I do not envy the police officer has to do this, but the little thermometer, I don't know, COVID reader thing goes red, and she starts making that kid a lot of promises, and I was like, oh, this kid, red means good, he's gonna get a lot of toys, his favorite food, and he's dead.
Yeah, did you pick that up? Because I wasn't sure. Like, I knew exactly what they were doing with, like, the red light, but did you pick that up when the red light came on? Like, that is the reader, that is...
Oh,
like,
yeah,
okay, this kid's infected. Okay.
Yeah. And listen, as someone who has often been looked in the eye by an adult and said, listen, you're a good boy, and you're going to get all the toys you deserve, and once Dad gets his cigarettes, he's going to come back. Like, I just immediately knew all of these were lies. So, yeah. I knew what was happening.
And this is an ad from the game because we don't get... They do some of this where they kind of show us the idea of like the red versus green and being able to test. And all of this is really to give us the moment at the end of the episode where Ellie kind of tests red as well. But very good addition. And all of this kind of culminates, right, with Pedro getting... Or not Pedro, Joel taking the body out of the truck because the woman couldn't do it and sees it as a kid. And it just shows us that... Joel is just, dead inside. Like, he sees this kid and has no hesitation to throw him in the fire and do kind of what needs to be done here.
Right. It's just he's doing his job in order to get the weird credits or cash. Yeah. They do that well. Yeah.
And this actually, again, listening to the showrunners talk through this a little bit, this was how they were going to end the first episode, with this little bit right here. And then decided, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't end the very first episode of this big television show with, like, 2 horrible kids, dying in these terrible circumstances.
The deaths being horrible, not the kids being horrible, is I believe,
kids
what
seemed
you
fine.
mean. Sure, the kids are fine.
Yes.
They're okay,
So they added to this and kind of got this super cut episode, since this one was close to, an hour and a half, but definitely needed, and I'm glad they kept going with it.
Yeah, no, that's a sad... that is a sad and brave way to start a show, but I think you would have had a lot of people popping out and not joining for episode 2. So that is interesting to know. We then kind of see life inside. Is this called like the quarantine zone? Is that what we're going to call it? Run by
called
Fedra?
QZ. And then Fedra being the Federal Disaster Response Agency. So, for lack of a better deal, they're like the government that's still trying to keep some semblance of order and guards and all that kind of jazz.
Right.
Yep.
Big government getting in our business so we can't have cigarettes. Yeah. Listen, I'm a Firefly all the way. Wolverines, Yeah. I don't know if those are similar in terms of whatever. Anyways, Joel's making deal with a guard, and he somehow has drugs. The guard has cigarettes, and don't we know it, Atlanta is where they're making all the pills and bullets. Or pullets, as I just tried to slur them together. Good job, Julian.
I like that.
Atlanta, home of the pullets.
You have to shoot the pills directly into the zombie's mouth.
Pullets, the last pill you'll ever take. Yeah. Anyways,
Like
we've got slogans. Also Coca-Cola from Atlanta. So there
Yeah.
you go. A lot of things that are good for you.
But like Atlanta is where the CDC is, right? So that's I
Yes.
think kind of interesting, right? That is where they're not really doing studies on how to save lives. They're making pills and bullets.
Yep. Having played the board game Pandemic during a pandemic, I know that Atlanta is where the CDC is located.
Yes.
I love his line where he says, I need the bag back. And it's just kind of pointing out, like, resources matter. And I'm assuming this is a game where you're constantly gathering things and using them for different stuff. Am I right in kind of the
sure.
feel of this? Like
Yeah,
when you look at his living space, it's just like what would seem like trash, but no one's manufacturing anything. So I'm assuming they're reusing and repurposing everything.
Yeah, for sure. Because like, I think the idea of the game is like, yeah, you pick up all your ammunition. Like if you just start spraying that on a wall for fun, then you're going to have a struggle with this game. You have to do a lot of searching and opening up a lot of drawers to find stuff.
Oh, I love a game where you open drawers. I love a game where you hold space bar and just run along the wall looking for the secret passage. That was Wolfenstein. That's the last time I played a game on a computer with MS-DOS. Anyways, he's trying to get a vehicle from the guard, right? That's what he's trying to buy off this guard and his buddies in order to get a vehicle. But then he knows the vehicle is going to need a battery, which leads to some other stuff. And so from there, we're introduced, because there's just stuff on the walls. Like, hey, look towards the light, slogan, like, yay, freedom, we're freedom fighters. And these freedom fighters are the Fireflies. And these Fireflies, I believe Tom did some research on them. They're a band of space cowboys. They're led by a charismatic Captain Reynolds and created by one Joss Whedon. Is that how you say his name? I believe. Am I
they
right?
Did share a title, but I think that is the start and end of it. This is a different Firefly. I think you went down a wrong Google rabbit hole.
There's multiple Fireflies?
There are, yes.
Okay.
And the Fireflies, like, I mean, I know you're joking, but like the Firefly's name was kind of funny too, or not funny, but the way they tag that into their slogan, right? Well, like kind of look towards the light, and the Fireflies are the ones that are providing the light. It's pretty cool.
Sure. No, very cool. Fireflies, super cool. We don't have them where we live, so less cool. But I've seen them in person. But when I saw them, they were called lightning bugs. Something totally different.
Lightning bugs wouldn't have been nearly as cool of a name.
Join the lightning bugs. Wait, is that one of those things where you earn badges and you like make whittle things? And they're like, no. Those are the Fireflies. We're the lightning bugs. We meet Tess. Talk to me about Tess, Tom. Is Tess part of the game?
Yeah, so she's another integral character that they do a little bit more here where, you know, it was kind of hinted at them having a relationship in the games, wasn't kind of explicitly told. And I think here we do kind of see that Tess and Joel are more than just friends, where she kind of like crawls into the bed and kind of cuddles a little bit, but ultimately just another fellow smuggler with Joel.
Okay, so there's not a level of the video game where Tess and Joel, how do I say this?
Tussle?
Wrestle. Yeah, tussle. That's the better way. And you have to hit the right buttons in order to finish the race? Is that?
No, that is not this game. This is rated mature for a different reason.
Oh, I will not be playing this game. That's where I'm at. We find her in kind of a interrogation almost, or we'll just
interrogation.
Say... Okay.
Not interrogation, but close.
Yeah, whatever. I'm not interested in saying words right. It feels like a family meeting to me. That's what it does. And we find out she wanted the battery, and the battery was sold to someone else. And Robert, who I don't know if he's going to be long with us. I don't feel like he is worried that he seems to be very worried about Joel. So, which gives me the indication that Joel is prone to violence and has hit people with wrenches before. And so she's like, listen, Joel's cool. He'll only hit you because he loves you. and he won't want retribution for this because I'll tell him we're all good. As family meetings typically do, the room explodes from a car bomb and ends the family meeting before anyone can get their allowance, which they earned for their hard work. And Tess is then arrested. And this is like world building in a way that's not explained. But I don't know. Having seen enough of these shows, I kind of get it. But I do like how they do all this. It's like, okay, we've got smugglers. We've got like things happening in the background. We also have an insurgency. We have the cops on the street the Fedra on the street that are arresting people. So I did appreciate this. It gave it some levels to what was happening in the show.
Yeah, exactly. And again, they're showing you this, right? They're not having a conversation, but like, yeah, these Fedra agents that are part of the federal government doing blah, 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 and these Fireflies are doing blah, blah, blah. Like, they do a little bit of that, but they do it very, very well.
Sure. We're then introduced to what I assume will be a minor character that will not last very long, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on her. But that character she calls herself Veronica, but we find out her name is Ellie Williams. And she's played by Bella Ramsey. She's being held captive in a room next to a water heater, space heater. I don't know. Those heaters in those rooms, I think I know what they do, but I've never been around them. But that's not important. The character's more important than the infrastructure of the house, how it's heated, whether or not the water's warm, whether or not the room is warm. I digress. This actress, who is Bella Ramsey, played Lyanna Mormont, and Lyanna Mormont made such an impression on me from Game of Thrones.
Yes.
She's the last of her name. She is a giant slayer, and she was incredible in that show. And so it's fun to see. I don't know that I've seen her anything else. Maybe I have. I don't follow her career. But like, I really like this actress. And from a young age, she crushed it in acting. So I hope, and she does great in this. So I'm excited. I'm excited for Ellie Williams, Lyanna Mormont, the last of her name.
Yeah, and it's great too, right? Because both of these main characters here, and Pedro and Bella, both have kind of their stardom from Game of Thrones and are able to take completely different characters with how they're playing in this and still do a phenomenal job. Just shows how good of an actor both of these individuals are. But this was a lot, not like controversial, right? But whenever somebody that has such an affinity for, or like a community that has such affinity for these characters, every time you hear the casting, people are always a little bit suspect. And I think there are a lot of people that were probably suspect when they kind of said Bella Ramsey was going to be Ellie for this, because Ellie does have a very specific personality, and she's snarky, and she's kind of always keeping people on her toes. She's very, very smart, but kind of tiptoes that line, and it's not an easy thing to play. And I think she just does it so perfectly and brings this character absolutely to life. And I can't wait to see more of her.
Do those people know Lyanna Mormont stabbed a giant in the eyeball with a dagger? Like, listen, she's gonna do you right, okay?
So true.
So we're introduced to her, and we gather that she's currently a prisoner of this insurgency, the Fireflies. We cut from there. We meet the radio message guy, who I'm assuming is just rolling in dough because there are people lined up down the hall in order to send radio messages to, maybe not always to Wyoming, but other parts of the country because there's no cell phones. Pretty soon someone's going to create a thing called electric mail, where they'll be able to send letters via something called the World Wide Web. And man, these people are in for some fun. They'll have a pen pal named Jelly Bean. That'll turn out poorly. Anyways, I'm not going to go into it. Sorry, I'm projecting a little bit on this show. But we find out that Joel, who cuts the line, and I don't like line cutters, so this is actually where I turned on Joel, and I do not like him anymore. But he's trying to reach Tommy, who is in Wyoming. And so this kind of puts us on the path of Joel is going to leave town in order to get to Tommy, who he hasn't heard from in a number of weeks. That's the kind of ticking clock.
Yeah, I think the assumption here is what they kind of say, that Tommy and Joel still actively talk, even though we find out a little bit later when he has that conversation with Marlene that he kind of feels that Marlene and the Fireflies kind of turn Tommy against him. So they're not probably in the greatest of terms, but they still do talk. And in this sequence, we find out that they haven't talked for the last 3 weeks, and Joel is very concerned.
Sure. Because they typically do Wordle once a week together, and they haven't been doing Wordle together, so he's upset. Yeah. Tom, we used to do Wordle together every day. What happened to us? Where did you go?
I ran out of 5-letter words.
Oh, man. Wordle's great. Once again, if you're listening to this in 2050, look up Wordle. It'll have a Wikipedia page, I'm sure. One John Wordle created the best game ever made. From this scene, we have Tess and Joel reconnecting. She looks great. He looks great. And they decide, she's like, listen, I promised him you wouldn't go after him, but I'd really love it if you'd go after him. And we need to go get that car battery. And this is like, I don't know, in a world like this, I would assume you've got to kind of be this cutthroat in order to make things happen.
Well, especially for these people, right? Like, they're smugglers. They're not taking any guff. They know what to say to get in and out of situations.
Are people still saying not taking any guff, Tom? Do you? I mean, you say that unironically, so I guess I'm going to assume. Or is that just? Is that the tagline for this game? The Last of Us. We don't take no guff. And you're like, all right.
We ain't afraid of no ghosts.
No ghosts. There it is. We have Marlene talking with her like second in command, and it's like, listen, we're bombing all these places because we don't want Fedra here. And Fedra seems like a pharmaceutical company. I'm just going to say it. Like, Fedra made the new vaccine. Like, that's what it sounds like to me. But talking with her, so she's like, listen, we're taking that girl. We're leaving Boston. We're never looking back. We're taking the midnight train. We're going anywhere. And then we go from there to Marlene and Ellie having a nice moment where she gives her back her backpack. And as one does, she gives this teenager back her switchblade, which is very important.
Yeah, I mean, in this world, everybody needs their switchblade. But Marlene is a fantastic character, and this is the only character that is the same voice actor to actually portray her character on screen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know what the actor that looks like, the actor that plays Joel, do you know what he looks like in real life and why he didn't get the part?
Well, I mean, the guy's name is Troy Baker, and he's an incredibly handsome and talented man in his own right that probably could have played the role, but I think they might have wanted somebody a little bit more recognizable and in the fame that Pedro has. And
justice
with that
for
being
Troy
said,
Baker.
Pedro crushes it.
Justice for Troy Baker. I love a good switchblade. I wish I had one. I wasn't allowed one as a child. For some reason, my parents thought it was not a good thing to carry around. But I learned a dance fight because of it, so that's something.
Well, the interesting thing, and we'll obviously get to it as we get to the show, but some of the cool concepts here is, she is, I don't know exactly how old she is in here. We'll just call her 15 or whatever. Like, the age of this girl, Ellie, she was born in this world. She doesn't have any knowledge or understanding of what a quote-unquote normal world was.
Sure.
And this is a kid that needs to carry a switchblade. It's a different world than where she lived. So we see it when she kind of looks through Joel's book here in a bit about the different Billboard #1 hits. She's very curious about what the world used to be, and it's really fascinating.
Tom, are you implying that I grew up in a world where I shouldn't have carried a switchblade? Because here's the deal, man. When I was a kid and I got one of those toys that was in like that thick plastic where they like soldered all the edges, I mean, scissors weren't going to cut it. So that's what my switchblade was for. Getting a Beanie Baby out of its packaging in order to not cut the tag because it would be worth something. That's what a switchblade is for. So please don't tell me I didn't grow up on the rough streets that required a switchblade. I'll wait for your apology.
Beanie Babies and Ninja Turtle plastic toys. Got it.
Done. Also opening letters. Do you remember letters, Tom? They needed to be open by hand with a blade.
Touche.
Tess and Joel do some fun little tunnel, and this is also part of the show that I appreciate because it's like they don't explain Joel and Tess's background like as someone who's coming in cold, I would venture to say at some point maybe they were part of the Fireflies. They certainly have been involved in smuggling, like they're doing illicit things, and that's how they know like where to climb under, where to go through, where to find the tunnels, all those things. So at no point do I feel like they have a conversation that's like, hey, remember where we were running drugs through that tunnel? Oh, yeah, that would be perfect for... Like, they don't do that. They're just like, hey, we know where to go in order to get to certain places we're not supposed to be. They do have the moment where they come upon the guy that needs to eat a cheeseburger. He's splattered against the wall. I think he's going to be okay. But is that like the end? Is that what the fungi's end like stage looks like? Is that what happens when they're done, or was this not part of the game?
Yeah, so this is the kind of visual you see here of somebody just plastered against a wall and the fungus kind of going everywhere. This kind of introduces that idea of the spores. So when the fungus is kind of done with somebody and it can't control them anymore, it will more or less move the spores and push the virus as much as it can to other people.
So in the game, you would walk up to that, hit triangle in order to loot whatever is stuck to the wall. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyways, they hit X, they go through a hatch, and they find themselves in a hallway where a shootout has gone bad. We see Beardy McBaddery Steeler dead on the floor, and they have a conversation with Marlene about Ellie, who we meet, and it's Joel and Tess trying to decide whether or not they want to accept the escort mission on level 3 of The Last of Us.
This is such a cool introduction of these characters together, which I think is very similar to what happens in the game, where Ellie and Joel start their relationship with Ellie trying to stab him, but he just takes her and throws her against the wall. It's just so great for people that have seen and know the game to see their relationship like start here. It's great, and the way they shot it was brilliant.
Right, and they have kind of a lining up of motivation here. He's trying to get to Wyoming. They need Ellie to go wherever. And so it's, hey, we need to get a vehicle. Oh, a vehicle has presented itself. So they are going to take care of themselves in the same line, escort Ellie. So they decide to do that. But before they can leave the QZ zone, they've got to wait till dark. So they go and have the great let's hang out in the apartment and, meet each other, show each other pictures of the kid that they just had that they're never going to see again, that sort of moment.
This is fun, too. I think, especially for the video game audience, to see this banter with Ellie and Joel and how she's, kind of cracking his music code and messing with him and just her snarky comments. It's great. She mentions that, like, Frank and Bill, I think those were the names that were listed on his little kind of cheat code thing, which again is another nod to the game because you
by
pick
the
up
radio,
a lot of,
you mean?
Yeah, sorry, about what the different genres of or decades of songs, what they mean, and her kind of figuring that out was cool. And again, nod to the game because you pick up a lot of notes that say, hey, this safe in this convenience store has this code, and then when you pick that up, then you can go open that safe. So it's the idea of you kind of finding these codes and different notes throughout, because a lot of these notes that you pick up through the game help tell a lot of this backstory. And I don't think this is a spoiler by any means, but like Frank and Bill, these two characters, these have been casted in the show, and we're going to see them later.
Wonderful. I do appreciate she walks in and she's like, hey, your watch is broken. What a jerk move,
Well, and that's, again, is a very pivotal thing, right? Because it was this present from his daughter, clearly means a lot to him. And then the fact that it's kind of broken here is, again, signifying the moment that Joel's life really stopped and stood still.
Right.
So he kind of continues to wear it to never forget her.
Sure. No. Well, that's a sad thing to think about. Thanks for bringing me down, buddy. They leave the QZ. It's at night. I think it's raining. It's pretty ominous. And they run into a guard peeing on a wall, which he is not allowed to do, so they arrest him. That's not what happens. The guard turns on them, certain things happen. In the end, we find out that Ellie registers red on the thermometer device, and Joel then gently puts the guard to sleep with his fists, I think is the best way for me to describe it. But during this part, we have Ellie explaining, even though it's red, she hasn't shown any symptoms, and it was weeks ago, I think she says. So we are finding out that she has immunity to whatever this fungi disease is, and so that is why she is important.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I don't really know the extent of why she's being smuggled, but that is why like Marlene has put all of her eggs in this basket and is trying to get Ellie out of here, and has kind of recruited Joel and Tess to take her where they need her to go. One thing I thought was very, very, very well shot in this sequence is, the way Joel ultimately takes out this guard, which it's shot so similar to the scene we got in the beginning with Sarah. And now kind of his choice of how he reacts to this, where he just bowls him over and just punches the living daylights out of this guy, probably killing him. But the interesting thing not only is how Joel reacts, but the different reactions from both Ellie and Sarah. Whereas Sarah sees this happen and his father wrenches this whole woman and she just tears and is just absolutely destroyed. But because Ellie has grown up in this world, when she sees this happen and sees Joel kind of defend her, she leans into it and she's like, I don't know, it's like drawn to it. It's just such a fascinating kind of character arcs and developments of these two young girls that are growing up in completely different worlds.
Sure. The world looks bleak, Tom, because we are leaving the QZ zone into what I would describe as a world that a dragon created in a Matthew McConaughey and Christian Bale movie. It is very bleak, and they do a quick cut here back to the radio, and the radio's playing, and this comes into play with the code that she somehow figured out.
Yeah, we get the song on the radio. I think it's Depeche Mode, Never Let Me Down Again. So 80s song, so we know, okay, something's going on the other end of this radio. There's something bad happening. And I don't know a lot of the details. I won't go through it, but there is apparently some parallels with the lyrics, both Joel and Ellie, and kind of how their relationship kind of forms and everything that you can draw from just this first episode. So if you have an interest, you can kind of go look at it. But I think the showrunners were very specific with choosing this song, and I wouldn't be surprised if it even comes back.
Sure. I think they were choosing between this and the Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting song. Okay. Those were their two choices. And
I thought you were going to go Rick Astley.
No, I would never do that to people. I know that is a common prank, and I would never let people down like that. So I enjoyed this. It was an hour and 30 minutes. It seemed to go by quick. It's a pretty... From going from $18.99 to this, it's pretty straightforward. But there's something to be said about a show that is just well shot, well acted, looks good, and can engage you with like the right pacing to know, okay, this is going to be a journey. We're going from A to B. We've got a little bit of an escort mission on our hands with Ellie. And it's going to be how, initially these three kind of develop relationships with. And so I'm extremely interested. I don't have a whole lot of theorizing because I don't think there's a lot of questions. No. We kind of know what's happening, but it certainly is well done and fun to watch. So I'm excited to continue the journey to Wyoming, which I'm assuming is where we're going. And for you, as a guy that loved the video games and was excited about this, I'm hoping, did it tickle your wisdom teeth in the way you wanted the show to? I'm assuming that's a pretty common phrase for those of us in the dental industry. Did it tickle you in the right way? That's not the right
I don't think I have any wisdom teeth anymore. I'm pretty sure I got them all pulled, but it did tickle my fancy. It was great. Like this I even contemplated picking up and replaying the game because I was just so excited about this, but I want to be able to experience the show and the story that they're going to tell, but I will likely pick this up and play it again because it's such a brilliant adaptation of the work. And again, we're only one episode in. I don't know exactly where they're going, but I'm assuming they're going to stay. Yeah, but I'm assuming they're going to stay pretty close to the story because there isn't a need to really jump too far because the source material is just that good. and knowing all these beats that are going to be coming up. It's great. And I'm so excited to be doing this with you, because getting your perspective as somebody that has no idea of any of the source material, it's fun. It's fun to kind of watch it through your eyes. And I'm doing the same with my wife, because she might have watched me play a little bit of this video game in the past when I did play it a handful of years ago, but all of this is new to her as well. It's a fun show. And it's also fun to watch a show that releases weekly, and we don't just binge it. Like, we can talk about it, we can digest it and have conversations. It's a lot more entertaining, I think, in the long run.
I'm sorry, you're married?
I am.
Okay.
I didn't tell you? I invited you to the wedding, but you didn't come.
Oh, unkind. Don't make me feel guilty. All right. For those of you that are still with us, we appreciate it. We like going from show to show and taking on different, mediums. They're not all the same, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this one goes, and it gives me something to do Sunday evening, that's for sure. So we appreciate you joining us. You can write us or hit us up at teambingepodcast@gmail.com. We do really appreciate those of you that write us. We've got some great people that we've met through the internet, just like Jelly Bean when I was a child. Anyways, you can also, Tom, tell them what are the other things that they can reach out to us on.
Yeah, you can find us at Team Binge on Twitter and Instagram, or Team Binge Podcast on Instagram. But yeah, continue the conversation there. This is a fun show. We're all watching this together episode by episode, so let us know what you think. We'll try to be active. It's a fun community to be active with. I've been pretty active on Twitter. It's fun to see people's reaction. Again, it's just a fun show, and we love to, the reason we do this podcast is obviously just for ourselves, and it's fun to hang out with a friend and talk through a show. The fact that we've got people that listen to us and enjoy it and engage with us, it just makes it all that much more fun. So we appreciate the community we've been able to develop.
Yeah, no, definitely. Barrett, have fun in Arizona. For those of you that love board games, we've got a buddy named Seth who is into that stuff. You can find him if you go through our Twitter, but great dude. And then John out there in Pineville, hope you're taking care of yourself. We like to finish very frequently. Actually, we've never missed an episode where we've talked about other media that we're consuming. This is something that traditionally, once again, in all 400 of our podcasts, we've talked about this. But Tom, other than The Last of Us and This Is Us, is there a piece of media that you're enjoying right now that you'd like to recommend or, throw out to the audience?
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely late to the party on this one, and it pains me to say that even though Netflix did cancel 1899 and it's not getting a second season, I did pick up another Netflix show called Wednesday, which follows kind of the young Wednesday Addams and kind of tells the Addams family story from her perspective. It's very much kind of like a teenage drama, but it's a lot of fun, and it's shot really well. And the main actress that plays Wednesday is just phenomenal. And it's got some fun cameos. Even Christina Ricci, who's probably our Wednesday Addams from our generation, from the Addams Family movies, she plays a character in it. So a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend that as well.
Wonderful.
How about yourself, my man?
Well, you recommended The Patient, which is on Hulu, which is, listen, if you watch The Last of Us and The Patient together, ooh, it's dark. The world's dark, and it's bleak. But the nice thing about The Patient is it's about 22 minutes an episode, so you can really crush that show quickly. But really the thing I want to recommend the most is I think they released 2 more episodes of Bluey for the 3rd season of Bluey. Nice. Listen, watch The Last of Us, The Patient, any dark show you want, but finish with Bluey, and you will just feel better about the world. And... cannot recommend that show enough. The best thing about Bluey is it's 7-minute episodes. So.
Yeah. It sounds like a theme here.
Oh, man. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us again for a show. We'll be through here to Wyoming, I'm assuming. Oh, Tom, I should have asked you this. So you completed this game, right? You got all the way to Wyoming?
Sure. Well, I can't say where and when I got to places.
Giving us
Good
a little
try,
bit of
pal.
clue there. Okay, so you did. And so were you the top scorer when you got to Wyoming? I'm assuming this is a game where scores matter.
No, my brother ASS is still number one.
All right. With that, I have been Julian.
And I've been Tom. We'll see you next week, everybody.